And now for something completely different. So you can sit back and relax. And yeah, we do want some questions for sure. But just as a little interlude, we're going to give you some information about GSE maintenance and what we're doing. And since we're new to you, I'm going to introduce myself, and my speakers are going to come on and introduce themselves briefly. I'm Steve Savage. I work in the ground operations department, as you probably guessed, and my colleague Massimo and Sunny. And now I'd like to ask my speakers to come on stage, and that's part2 Korgel of Donata, Alessandro Pastorelli of TCR, and Michiel Heikens of KLM. And part2, would you continue to stand and just introduce yourself quickly?
Hello everyone, my name is part2 Korgel. I'm head of GSE planning for Donata International and vice chair of IATA's GAD working group. My main role in Donata is to plan, develop, and implement a global GSE strategy, including standardization, digitalization, and introduction of green GSE. Thank you.
Alessandro.
Good afternoon. My name is Alessandro Pastorelli. I'm the general manager for TCR in Italy. I have 34 years experience in the industry. I've been in airlines and ground service providers, and as such, I get dragged into the GAD working group on occasion as needed to support the industry. Thank you.
And finally, Michiel.
Good afternoon. I'm Michiel Heikens. I'm head of the GSE of KLM at Amsterdam located.
Thank you very much, all of you. Right, so I just want to manage expectations and let you know that we are at the start of these things on GSE maintenance. Yes, there's something in the AHM which is about basic GSE maintenance for when there isn't anything else, but now we're going into it in a lot more detail. And what you're going to see is some background, an introduction to the approach that we want to take, and into what is actually quite a complex subject. What you're not going to see is a maintenance checklist. Not yet. That's coming. It's work in progress. So, why should we care? I've got myself mixed up here. There's an old saying that a workman is only as good as his tools. And this is just as true for a driver or an operator of ground support equipment. Of course, there's the equally old counter-statement that a poor workman will always blame his tools. The point of GSE maintenance is to make sure that the ground service provider's tools are good and that there can be no valid blame laid against the GSE. In other words, the GSE is safe, it's serviceable, and everything is that it can be done technically to make it operate properly so that the operations can proceed safely. You would think that that is obvious, but incident reports, feedback from auditors indicate that this is, there's some really good GSE maintenance done, but there's also some very sketchy or non-existent GSE maintenance. So why do we need to care about GSE maintenance? Well, simply put, poorly maintained GSE will result in increased risk of fatalities and injuries, not to mention damage to aircraft, damage to infrastructure, damage to equipment, with the corresponding unnecessary costs, delays, cancellations, etc. During the conference, we have reached the topics of enhanced GSE, autonomous GSE, sustainable GSE, and all the investment and everything that is needed to put all of that in place. But if you don't do the GSE maintenance properly, all of that investment is for nothing. So what is apparent in the industry is that any reputable GSE manufacturer has a maintenance manual, and that they are prepared to agree to variations to that if they're presented with a proper case that explains why it's necessary to vary the GSC maintenance schedule due to operations or an operating environment that is different from the norm. However, it is also apparent that there's lack of consistency and detail in those manuals, as well as sometimes quite wide variations across the industry for equipment that is outwardly very similar. And we thought at this stage it would be a good idea to take you through some experience in the industry. And for that, I want to ask part2 to take us through some of that. And then after that, it's going to be Alessandro.
Thank you,
part2.
Steve. Just really quickly, I want to give two perspectives, one from a maintenance manager's perspective, one from an auditor's perspective. A maintenance manager in any ground handling organization is expected to have a decent maintenance checklist that his team, his technicians can use and refer to when they're performing maintenance. Although it sounds very easy, depending on the scale and size of operation, that can be a very time-consuming task for a maintenance manager. And if you look, as Steve mentioned, when you look at the manuals, some of the manuals provided by manufacturers are very detailed. There are 5, 6, 7 pages of regular maintenance inspections required. Some of them you see only 1 page, which all says refer to this manual, refer to engine manual, refer to transmission manual, etc. So it's not giving any detail, and then you have to do your all digging and scouting for information to establish a decent maintenance checklist. Another case where if a maintenance manager is in charge of multi-stations and he's working on a standardization, he might end up having many different checklists for the same type of equipment, especially for organizations like us, let me say. As Donata, we operate in 90+ airports in the world, and if you go to those airports, we were seeing different standards, which we are addressing. Now, from auditor's perspective as well, whenever an ISAGO auditor visits the station, and against the ISAGO requirement of confirming that the ground service provider is following manufacturer's guideline, when you look at the checklist and compare it with the manual, sometimes, it is also a very time-consuming task. Thinking about all the remote audits that we would perform internally within our company, or maybe in the future, remote ISAGO audits were under discussion. I don't know, it won't be an ISAGO audit, but IGOM audit. This becomes very difficult to confirm. So we embarked this journey of creating standard checklists for each equipment type and model. And as Steve mentioned, this is just at infancy yet. We are going to prepare the Excel checklists. These will not be published in IATA as pages of documents, but it will be added as digital copies. But in the future also, we are going to look at getting these Excel checklists into a format that the maintenance management systems, the digital systems, can accept. So for a maintenance manager, whenever they acquire a unit, it would be very easy to download the standard checklist and upload to their maintenance management system. It will be time-saving, it will ensure standard processes are followed, and it will be easier to demonstrate compliance against AHM and IGOM requirements. So I'll pass to my colleague, Alessandro.
Thank you, Bartu.
Explain his experience.
Okay, so just a few words about TCR, just in case you don't know us, and I hope you will as you carry on in your task. My task today is to bring you across the process of GSC maintenance. Now, TCR is not a manufacturer of GSC. We are not a ground service provider, but we are a service provider of ground equipment. So, as you can see, we are in 14 different countries around the world, from the US all the way down to New Zealand. We own and manage more than 35,000 assets between motorized and non-motorized. Some of the biggest organizations in the world we are honored to have as our customers, like KLM, like Danata, by the big global service providers. But you will be going out in the world and we're finding small organizations. So we want to take this opportunity to show you through a process. This is the TCR approach to GSC maintenance, which is something which will help you, we hope, see what you're looking at when you're auditing not the big organizations, which, like in the case of Weigel and Isago, you will find very standardized with only the small local deviations, but the smaller organizations which don't have the capability of having big structures and organizations behind them, but will help you, we hope, to find some direction in what you're looking at, so not just the checklist. TCR has a very strong commitment as part of the industry in ESG, of course. The reason why this is our project called, our plan called 3x3. The reason why I'm pulling this slide up and specifically is right in the middle, because among our drivers for ESG is protect our customers' workers. We provide ground service equipment, normally including maintenance, but we don't use it. Of course, we have workshops, we have technicians working on the equipment, and that's what we want to safeguard. But we want to make sure that within our processes, we are keeping everyone safe, not just our people. So that is why that is there. So a bit like in ground handling, a ground handling organization needs to have basically an organization, resources, equipment. We see the same things basically for an R&M organization. And we are not simply an R&M organization. I'll get to that soon. But we do need people and expertise. We need experience, and we need tools. And this is what you need to look for in GSC maintenance. And it can be small. You can have a small ground service provider with its own little workshop and a couple of guys in there who are very specific and know their job. No doubt about it. You don't have to have Ferrari Formula One style workshops to have serviceable equipment. So again, safety for us is at the core of operations, of our operations and of our customer operations. The reason why compliance is important, it's not only about safety, which is paramount, but it's also about saving money. It's about cost. GSC, which is properly maintained, is effective. It lasts more. It causes less inconvenience, if you like. And because we own the equipment, we put it to the service of our ground service providers, we have an even stronger interest than some of our customers sometimes that the GSC is properly maintained. As I was telling you, we are not simply an R&M organization. TCR is made of capital for investment in GSC, in know-how for maintenance, and in an organization that helps our customers in fleet management. So we have a headquarters in Brussels where, let's say, we have most of our general organization, and then we have more than 70 workshops worldwide with technicians which carry out work with our customers on behalf of our customers. The reason why TCR is rather unique, and hopefully as you carry out your audits throughout the world, you will bump into TCR one way or the other. We also provide maintenance service to our customers who are renting our equipment. So you will be going through the process of the checklist, and at one point you will come to GSC maintenance, and the GSP or your auditing will say, yes, let's move over to TCR. And most of the times, of course, we are working with our customers. We are participating in the audit. You're looking at their organization, not ours, but it's the arm coming out of the body, so we are there to support them. And many times we've been there sitting with our customers, and the auditor says, yeah, TCR, I know you, because I've seen you in London, I've seen you in Paris, I've seen you in Cologne. The differentiator I was saying is that we are not an OEM, so we don't have any brand loyalty per se, because our task is to be able to accommodate the needs of our customers. So as you can see, we basically work with the major manufacturer of GSC worldwide, and we've been in the business for more than 20 years, so the experience and the information and the data on the duration and on the capabilities of each piece of equipment, of 1,000 models, we sometimes know better than the manufacturer themselves. As I said, GSC maintenance is a process. It's not just a checklist. It's getting information from the manufacturer and helping the customer, because we're looking at a tool that the GSPs need to work, okay? This equipment is on the ramp, it's loading aircraft, it's letting passengers board and offboard the aircraft and so on. So that is where it's got to stay, not in a workshop. So we have as many, and again, in the bigger, you will find this kind of organization with all the big GSPs, the big airlines. It's the smaller people, the smaller organizations that need to find the right model, which doesn't mean having, Amazon-style artificial intelligence, but you need to look at in the way they are addressing this process. So we have a maintenance management system which was developed on our own internally, and where we store all the information. It is a portal that gives an interface with the customer to activate any kind of requirement in terms of corrective maintenance. So any operator, if his company is giving them the appliance, can just log in onto the website and activate the system. Low battery, punctured tire, broken lights, or whatever. Okay, and from that moment on, everything is tracked, everything is recorded. We do, of course, happy for you, have checklists. Most of our checklists are, because of the way we've prepared our system, are approved by the manufacturers. So we've blended in the system and allowed in order to allow our maintenance teams to be more effective, we have adopted TCR checklists, which are manufacturer approved. The system logs the timing, so we pre-alert the maintenance, the ground service provider on a timely basis that we've agreed locally. It could be 1 week by the other, could be 1 month by the other. And then, of course, remember, this is GSC, which is in operations. The GSC, the ground service provider you're auditing might have had bad weather from another airport the week before, and 50 aircraft diverting, and they had twice the operations that they usually have, and they just didn't have time to stop the equipment on the 500 block hour timing, so they overskipped that. I don't think that's what you should be looking at. If it's 15, 50, or 20 hours they've gone over, there must be a reason. I was listening to the earlier presentation. You have to talk to the people and say, okay, this has happened, why? If it's systemic, it's an issue. If last week you had the G20 in your airport and you had all the heads of states coming in with 40 aircraft and that's a one-off, I think that you need to put that into perspective. That's how you will help the GSPs to understand, where they're going in the right direction. Again, our system then allows all the tracking. We document all. It comes out into the work order, which then eventually will go if it's a breakdown. Or we use the same system when we are maintaining the equipment of our customers. So our customers may have a share of equipment which is fully rented by TCR. So they don't see anything of this. We take care of it, but we could also have owned maintenance equipment that we are maintaining, but we use the same process. We load it in our system as if it was ours, so they see all this. At the end will also be perhaps an invoice, but it's all part of the system. So everything is recorded and stored, and as an auditor, if you come into the workshop, you will have seen GSC on the ramp, or you would have seen a turnaround and so on. Let's have a look at the maintenance records, and this is what you will basically find. Additionally, our equipment, our team, we have a SharePoint where any of us can just go and log on, and we have, as you can see, pictures, the manuals, C certificates, maintenance history. As a worldwide organization, we transfer equipment from one country to another because that's what we do. The reason why we like to own our equipment is when it comes out of rent, we can put it back in rent into another country. And when it comes into another country, we just go log on to our website and say, okay, what's coming in from where? What's its history? When was the last maintenance done? What do I need to do before I put it back into service with my new customer? And then, compliant with our organization, we also have KPIs in which we track record of what's going on. Also spare parts, so operation, availability of the GSC compared to downtime, maintenance compliance compared to the timing. Again, this is not exact science. You can't just expect that every 0 hours on the maintenance plan, everyone will be stopping the equipment. That's unrealistic. But of course, the system doesn't know that. So when we have deviations, That's where you will see deviations on our, and this is our internal system. This is not, we share it with our customer if needed, but this is just to show that the whole process is maintained and audited internally, if you like, so we make sure that we are thorough. Also on spare parts, all our workshops are connected, so before we go and ask for a spare part to the manufacturer, we check within our network if it's available. We ship spare parts from one part of the world to the other, if it's quicker than getting it from the OEM, which in many cases is. Okay, and that was all. I hope it was insightful for you, and thank you for your attention. I'll pass the word to Michael from KLM.
Thank you. So basically what we did as the GID group, we are working on the minimum requirements because not all over the world we got nice systems like TCR has. So what we did with the group, there were several parties involved, all with their own knowledge to come to the minimum requirements for the maintenance. The manufacturers, the airlines, ground handlers, and lease maintenance companies. We decided to first start with the critical GSE, develop the checklist, and have the minimum requirements, as I said. The checklist, we developed a template which is universal for all the GSE. So they are more or less similar, although there are different makes and different ways with the driveline, for instance. And we said we have for instance, a diesel engine. The diesel engine maintenance will comply in every diesel-driven GSE. So we can use the block of the GSE of the diesel engine for several equipment. We did a look at the OEM minimum requirements. We did have a look at especially the safety equipment on the GSE, and we do request some other intervals than the OEMs do, especially when it comes to aircraft detection and aircraft protection systems. So we do only the maintenance checklist. We do not the daily checklist or the shift checklists or the pre-use checklists, whatever the GP have, but we focus on the maintenance. As Part2 said, the checklist will be available digital, so it can be put in any system you have on any location. And it will enable you to have the checklist to audit against. The intervals, so this is the main intervals. What we look at when there is a OEM checklist, you always follow the OEM. You follow the OEM on the interval, you follow the OEM on the items. You can vary. The operator can vary, but always more strict, then it's okay, or he has an agreement with the OEM that he can deviate from the OEM perspective. So we come, in the end, that's the minimum list we have made. That's for you.
Good.
Thank you.
Okay, as I said, this is work in progress. We have actually developed a couple of the checklists, but we're not ready to share them just yet. Busy building them out of the libraries that Michiel mentioned. We have a very ambitious timeline here. So the idea is that we take the really critical equipment, typically the stuff that's actually going to be docking at the aircraft, and see if we can build the maintenance checklists for that equipment, see if we can get them published ready in time for the next edition of the AHM, and then gradually add the other equipment in time for the next edition, and then implement that with the campaigns and information, maybe some webinars or something like that, with the idea of starting full adoption by 2024. As I say, quite ambitious, but already one of the GSE manufacturers that's part of our group has said, yeah, the moment we start publishing these checklists, they're going to switch over to our format for issuing their GSE maintenance, they're going to use our format for their maintenance checklists for the equipment that they manufacture. So that's about it from us, and we're more than happy to take some questions from you. So we're at your disposal. Or not. Oh. Yes.
We nearly made it.
This is for Alessandro. When I was looking at the slide where you show the KPIs, I was wondering if you have any safety KPI also related to, I don't know, the incidents or accidents where the GSE have been involved, or results of investigation where GSE are involved.
Yes, actually, it was part of the presentation we had on Tuesday. We have our own health and safety management system where we log all the incidents. Of course, we are not a GSE operator, so everything regarding our GSE is normally notified by us, by the customer. I mean, we don't think there can be an instance where there's been an accident with one of our pieces of equipment and the customer will not report it to us, because checking the GSE will be part of the investigation. So we do log it on. So we do have our system logging on all the information which is reported to us. So we manage everything that happens within our workshops, of course, that we do directly, and everything regarding the GSE comes through the information we receive from our customers. This is not part of these KPIs. That's managed on our health and safety level, though. But yes, it is tracked.
Thank you.
Afternoon. Regarding the precedents that you listed, so you had at the top you had the manufacturer, right, and then GSP variation, but approved by the manufacturer, and then finally the minimum, which would be IATA. So if we find any of those, we wouldn't consider that a variation in the way that we have been discussing it here, in terms of variations to the IGOM, right? Any of those three would be acceptable.
Yes. So essentially, the default is the OEM. And then if for some reason or another the operator needs to have a change, or needs to be different from what the OEM states, then speaking to the OEMs that we have involved, they seem to be more than willing to agree or approve a change if they're presented with a reasonable case for or reason why it needs to change. I mean, if you you have a 6-monthly check, but you're using a high loader at a remote station once a week or once every 2 or 3 days, then maybe 6 months is way too short. You agree that with the OEM, and then that's what you put into your service interval with a reference to the agreement, to the thing. The minimum IATA one is basically to try and cover the type of instance where you don't have an OEM anymore. It's an old piece of equipment, the manufacturer no longer exists, and we want to put at least a guide there, so that at least there's a minimum maintenance requirement, so that that equipment will in fact be maintained.
So the case of TCR, for example, their equipment is obviously the second one, right? The yellow one that we had in the slide, which is different checklists and different intervals and so on, but approved by the manufacturer.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Any other questions? Good. Well, thank you very much for your time. We hope that this was just a heads up for you guys, but it's coming.
will switch to 4.6.
Yeah. 4.6, JJ.
Yep.
Departures.
I will get in there.
What? Good afternoon again, everyone. The countdown clock here says 1 hour and 9 minutes and 45 seconds. I'm not sure if any of our derrieres could cope with that length of time, but we'll certainly give it as long as the consensus of you all is there's value in us continuing. We had a look at Chapter 3 fairly extensively before we took the break. I think it's worthwhile just moving on to Chapter 4. Chapter 4 is aircraft turnarounds. It's had something of a restructure in as much as it's very clearly sectionally laid out with titles and then content that follows the process of what you will see on a ramp in terms of actions prior to an aircraft arrival through the process of turnaround handling and actions post-departure. Again, I'll highlight the same thing. If you see green content in column C, it means it's new. That's not necessarily brand new in terms of it doesn't exist in edition 11. It may be that it's moved. And column D, again, will define for you a process step that is auditable or one that isn't. And as we discovered, thank you, this document isn't 100% accurate. So if you see any others that say no or yes and seem obviously incorrect, please let us know again. Where are we going to start? Did we get through this chapter, JJ? Is there anything particular that
I should just go through it. I think then you see the logical behind it and how we put it in right now.
Okay. Let's just stop there for a while. We've come through now chronologically actions prior to arrival, during arrival, and now we're at the point where the aircraft has stopped on the centre line. And we're about to start turning the aircraft round. We now follow through the sequence steps that you would certainly expect to see as the team of agents and ramp team leader engages with the aircraft. A lot of this content is as is, certainly the point around receiving clearance to approach the aircraft only after anti-collision lights have been switched off. Which won't happen until engines likewise are switched off and spooling down is standard. The inspections prior to equipment positioning are again written in the right place now chronologically. There is a difference based upon the fact that a PBB is terminal infrastructure, not GSE technically. So once chocks are positioned, you can, and it's conformant if the PBB crosses the ERA and approaches the aircraft after clearance when the cabin door and surrounding area has been inspected and confirmed there's no damage. Other GSE or GSE may not enter the ERA, of course, until not just chocks, but cones too have been positioned and then clearance given. So all of this is as per the sequence of events that haven't changed. As I said, we've not fundamentally changed the turnaround process itself. And then in line 35, having talked about the inspection of the PBB, there's then the rest of the walk-round inspection for cargo access doors and the other parts of the fuselage and wings. We've got a note there, and again, one of you may have picked this up, but I've picked it up myself. I said to you by way of introduction that the process points will be auditable and notes, cautions and danger boxes won't be. If you have a look in line 43, we've actually got what is a if-then process point identified as a green, a yes, but it's a note, so we'll need to sort that one out. Gurdeep, I can't remember if he's had a conversation on that previously. And continue to scroll down, we've got a section called GSE for arriving aircraft. In this case, the section is just purely about the positioning of ground power or fixed power units. And it talks about the ability to pre-position a GPU where the airport operator has a marked position for it on the aircraft. So again, standard, and I don't think there's anything here that we changed. And that's the same information, following the same principle, but for PCA, preconditioned air. There is a point there it's probably worth just highlighting. I've made much of the fact that we tried to make, if you just scroll down a little, go deep, I've made much of the fact that we tried to make this content chronologically sequenced, both for the GPU and the PCA. It seems silly because we were just talking those two particular kinds of equipment there, not to put disconnect. So that's the only point I think you'll find where you could have said to me, Steve, that's not sequenced correctly. We're talking disconnected and we've not even offloaded the aircraft yet. So there's chocking that follows on thereafter. There is a standard, of course, for the IGOM. It's cones that chocks that should be positioned. There's two options, I think. One where we've positioned chocks at the nose and one main wheel, and the other option, which is where having positioned nose gear chocks upon immediate arrival, you then can place those chocks back at the second main wheel in the case of an aircraft with two main wheel types, or two of the 3 or 4 where it's a multi-gear aircraft type. So pretty standard stuff. I guess there's a question you might say, looking at this, well, that's quite a lot of content to be trying to observe, because my audit process on site is now, am I following the process? Non-auditor, please don't shout me down. I'm being honest, I'm not a non-auditor, but I audit every time I'm on the ramp, virtually, because I'm watching. And I know sort of the procedure pretty much off by heart, but I would imagine if you said to me, well, Steve, I've got 400 points and we've not even got a bag off the aircraft yet, this is going to be quite a task. And I guess practically my answer to that would be, well, yes, but assuming that you're used to auditing the ramp, it does almost become a little bit second nature in terms of you know the procedure, and as you just see a team, you can automatically know whether or not those 7 points are covered off. But that's just my view when I look at what we've already identified here as auditable points, when practically you've actually got to go and deliver that at an aircraft stand. Maybe that's not the case, but I would imagine that's how you would practically do this in order to cover off all of those points in a section, just by observing, okay, yeah, that's fine, yeah. So don't shout me down if that's not how you do it, and if anyone's got any particular points on it, by all means, please let me know. And then we come into coning. It's the stuff of a nightmare as a ground handler that handles many airlines. Do I have 2 at the wingtips and 1 in front of the engine? Potentially 1 at the front and rear service road where there's a service road, which is the basic standard, or do I have to position another 4 or 6 if it's a separate airline requirement? Again, as I said earlier, the ground handlers GOM will be as per the IGOM, I would think, in most cases. The points there that are highlighted in mushroom colour are just the points in the manual where you'd have the diagrams, but I assume you're all familiar with those. They're the standard coning diagrams that are in the IGOM today. Okay, then we've got a section in we've moved on to 4.6. Okay, so we come through loading and unloading, and we'll have a look at aircraft departure. Edition 10 saw quite a lot of content change for the departure process, which is sections 4.6 to 4.9. We actually put a lot of effort in to try and start to straighten out and get the departure process a little bit more sequenced correctly. There's some things in here, for instance, where we've got a section called ground staff member responsible, usually the headset operator, for the pushback. And although they're responsibilities, they're quite procedurally based. They're more procedures than responsibilities, in fact. And the plan is that we will, in time, take that and make them procedural steps and leave just for the staff what are clearly definable responsibilities rather than process. But we talk here in terms of how it should be done. It recognises that in many airports it will be dependent upon the number of people and the equipment type, but the content in 4.6 does go through the different equipment types, whether conventional tractor and tow bar or whether a TBL. And there's even a section in there for nose gear remote control pushback tractors. I don't know if any of you ever seen one in operation, but a motor talk is the one sort of example that immediately springs to mind. So that's how the process flows.
I will go there.
Gurdeep's got a technical problem. Clearly the screen's not going to move forward.
Battery.
I'm looking at reading that. I'm not sure if it's talking about the actual Gurdeep's laptop or me. This is one clever screen. It's telling me what my health check is. Okay, and if you have a look to the point I said earlier, there was a section that just went through the screen, ground staff member responsibilities, and yet clearly we recognise them as process steps, and they're auditable. At this point, because we've not actually done too much more with 4.6 as yet, they will today and in edition 12 next April still stay there, but hopefully for the next edition we'll get the time and the bandwidth to correct this last part of the turnaround process. Okay, we list the functions for Wing Walker 2, not surprisingly. We talk about where they should be positioned and what they need to do in terms of maintaining their safety, and also in terms of what their actions are in the event that there's a potential hazard or the aircraft may be in potential danger of having a collision. And it's all pretty standard stuff. Again, most of these greens have just changed place. Pre-departure walk-down check is the first thing we list as part of pre-departure activities. Again, most of that you can see is green, and that's correct because it's a procedure. And if we keep going down, okay, so where are we there? That's the interphone connection.
There's a question, Steve.
Can I?
Sorry, I'm busy looking there, not upwards.
Yeah, no, that's
apologies.
Yeah. Boom, boom.
Yeah.
Sorry, I must have skipped something. The paragraph related to the responsibilities of staff during pushback. Is there any responsibility related to divided into who is connected in the headset, who is going to operate the pin, who is going to drive the pushback, or not?
4621 on screen now is entitled the ground staff member responsible for departure. Traditionally, and in most airports, we're going to see that person as the headset operator, because the ground staff member responsible for the departure, as is in the text, is the person who's communicating with the flight crew. So that's one of the key roles for which responsibilities are listed. And if Gurdeep just scrolls down a little further, There's the responsibilities of the pushback tractor driver. And here you can see that there's only a note. If you had edition 11 open, you'd see that the tractor driver had about 10 responsibilities. But we have been able to put those into the actual pushback process, which is a new section later in the document. But that's the second person. Sorry, the pushback tractor driver will. Some of those are there still. And then the wing walker. So they're the three roles that we describe responsibilities for in the pushback process.
And this is up to the GSP specific, because every GSP have their own organization set up, the designation. So that's why we have defined it very generic, the ground operations staff.
Carry on, Gertie.
We'll move to connection, disconnection. Yeah.
Okay, so connecting the pushback vehicle, again, as I said earlier, and if you know the manual today, it separates out the equipment type and describes the procedure for tow bar, as well as when you're connecting a TBL. And again, this is just changing order and adding in the process steps in one place, so you haven't got to go hunting across the manual to find it. Nose gear steering, most of that's descriptive in effect, but there is a description of what the steering bypass shall look like, shall be, that starts from row 215, and it shall have a label that identifies it for the specific aircraft type. It shall have the streamer that says remove before flight. I do still see some places where, unfortunately, it's some old tatty piece of string, but mostly that's now a pretty consistent part of the bypass pin. And then connection of the pushback tractor and tow bar.
There's a question, Steve.
Yeah, sorry. It's me.
Just talk and then it will work.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
okay.
it.
Thank you. This 4.6.4.3a and the note, the subsequent note, has been something that at least I've been struggling with a lot of GSPs that have copied and pasted the IGOM on their manual. And we've been auditing so far, so until next change, against the GOSARP that says that no chocks can be removed without authorization from the cockpit. So are we keeping it like this? So nose gear wheel chocks may be removed without notification, provided the main landing gear wheel chocks are still positioned? Because what we are auditing against now is, before removing any chock, you have to notify the captain and receive acknowledgement from the cockpit.
No, it's notification and authorization prior to removing main wheel chocks. The point in point A is where it talks about where applicable is if you were to follow, I can't remember if it's option A or option B, but if your aircraft is chocked for the duration of its time on stand with 2 chocks at a nose wheel and 2 chocks at a main wheel, once you're positioning the pushback equipment, you need to remove the nose wheel chocks. Definitely. They've got to go back, haven't they, to be still an aircraft chocked. But you don't need to notify and seek a priority to remove those 2 nose wheel chocks. You will then have to later on to move the 4 nose wheel chocks that are on the main gear prior to the pushback. Okay, if you keep scrolling down, Gertie. And there's the same process just described for the tow bar-less tractor. I'll give you a couple of seconds to have a skim read if anyone's got any particular points on that. Point B is the same that we just looked at and talked about in the section above. And then 4645 actually comes on and talks about the remote control nose gear pushback, which ostensibly is a TBL, but it's operated by a joystick rather than within a cab. And so the content refers you back to the TBL connection process, other than for the points of checking the remote control battery and checking the charge level of the actual equipment itself. And there's the wheel chock removal, line 250 via the interphone, confirm the parking brake is set, check all GSE has been disconnected and the PBB, check that the tractor and tow bar is fully secured, and give clearance to the ground staff to remove the chocks.
There's a question.
Thank you. I've seen sometimes something in regard to the responsible, for example, this one. The responsible ground staff member should stow chocks in their designated stowage place, okay? I've seen it in the column D. This is not auditable, let's say. But I'm not judging it directly, but I would like to understand which is the criteria that you use.
That's an auditable item.
That's an auditable,
Yes,
so
that's
it's
correct.
yes.
Yes. Yes.
Because
It
there
should
are
be yes.
other, for example, on the action after the arrival,
Yes.
okay, A, B, and C items that also there is a shell and there are items that are considered not auditable. So I just would like to understand if there is any criteria, because I've seen that sometimes you have definition that this is not clearly auditable, but there are other actions that can be audited.
Row 256 is definitely inauditable, and that's one of those clean-up tasks we've still got to do. But thank you for picking it up. It's good to know that you're still avidly paying attention. Trust me, after 2 hours up here, well done.
But just to add on that, we had shared the workbook with all of you. Jessica had already shared, and we have received feedback from some of the auditors, and we are looking into this now. Because this is still in a draft format. By the time we received your feedback, we were already in Paris, so we were reviewing the worksheet with them. But whatever the feedback you have given, and that is in the next meeting, we're going to review that. So there might be slight change, yes, no, otherwise the whole of the concept is going to same. But whatever you have the feedback, please send us, whosoever have not sent, but whosoever have sent, we are looking into that with the ground operation task force. We're going to look into that, each and every point.
Okay, departure comms we've previously scrolled past, so if you keep going, Gertie. There's departure dialogue, and then we start pushback maneuver, which is a section we added last year as part of the change to try and make the departure process resemble a sort of a procedure that follows chronologically.
Excuse me, Steve.
Descriptive text. Okay, 2 questions.
Yes, I was waiting for it because I've been struggling for a long time with that. Point B, line 291. Let's go down. More.
What, row 282?
No, 291. 291. As a person shall signal clear to push to the pushback tractor driver and wheel workers, etc., etc. Okay, so we've been struggling a lot. I don't remember, JJ. We've been talking a lot with the pushback commencing, push maneuver sequence. And now we have a GOSAPs that ask clearly to verify that the pushback driver received the signal brakes released before the all clear. With this GOSAP, we are skipping that step to confirm, to have the confirmation from the headset operator to the pushback driver that the brakes are released with this signal. And this is there, and it's a very high safely concerned item to avoid any damage to the nose gear or to start pushing back with the brakes or the aircraft still engaged. So if we consider all clear, the all clear is this. So are we keeping this, or can we make any change on the IGOM, or just?
Well, we're keeping the clear to push signal. That's sort of certain, unless we as a group, when we're back together again, decided to change it. So the point you've raised about do you have to, or does the tractor driver give the brakes release signal, give the brakes release signal or not, I don't know. Have we changed that this year?
No.
Is that always been clear to push?
Yeah, it's at least
Clear
from
to push.
And that's
3
what I
years.
thought. And I don't see why
Maybe
we're
4
going to
editions
I don't see why we're going to change it.
But it's always been in contrast with our checklist that needs this step to be verified and assessed.
But the way it's written like here, this is the correct procedure. Or do you suggest something else? What would you
Well,
suggest?
I've been always struggling with the GSPs because they say we copied the IGOM, so it's correct. Yes, but in this procedure you missed this step. There's no.
Okay.
And that's what it says in the GOSAP, is it?
The GOSAP has to verify it, and well, let's say that from a safety point of view, it's something that we've been discussed on for a very long time in the IGOM groups.
Is this one of the examples of the GOSAPs and the IGOM being written as two separate things?
Yes.
Well, this is the procedure, and it's come from the procedures group.
But when the procedure is not correct, we have to look into it. So
But that's part of what we said. If there are things here that, practically, if that was, let's say practically at every airport you saw, it was this, not this, then that's absolutely the feedback that helps this manual develop in the right way. But I thought it was, but the IGOM's always been clear to push, not brakes released. Yeah.
check.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But now it's documented. Now it's clear. The IGOM and
No, we should add something.
So-
Gurdeep.
Clear
That's,
to
that's what
push.
he's saying. That's what he's saying.
okay.
So just to add on, I agree with him that a little bit of more clarity is required in that procedure. That's one. And second thing is, a lot of times the GSP is using the maintenance engineer to do the final clearance from the cockpit, etc. And then they just skip that part. They're saying, that's not my area. That is the maintenance engineer. And they just that part of the procedure, I don't know if other auditors have experienced that. It is given to, they say that belongs to the airline, that is outsourced, and then they don't follow that procedure. So what is your view on that? Because if we're really looking at ensuring the safety standard, then we have to make sure then, or we just say this is not applicable to the GSP, but actually it's a intrinsic part of that full safe procedure. So how do we deal with that?
That's absolutely in my DGOM. And I would be very surprised if it wasn't in Swissport, Menzies, many other GSP's procedure. But I know for certain there are airlines that employ a different contractor, or they have their own line maintenance engineer who carries out the role of the ground staff member responsible. If that person doesn't give my pushback tractor driver the all clear, or if he gave them the brake release, or he just nodded, and what can I do? Well, one, I can't be responsible for another organisation's failure to follow the process. So technically, at that airport, for that pushback, that point is NA. What might I want to do if I know it? If it were me, and again, I'll speak on behalf of many of the other, what I consider to be quality GSPs, because I know them in operations, all I can do, and I would do, is go and speak to that airline or speak to that contracted company and say, you're not following this. You're not giving my people your responsibilities in the process. But that is as much as I can do. I guess practically I could say to the pushback driver, just wait and don't move until he physically gives you that signal. But I'd like to think we wouldn't have to get to that point where the airline was paying the price for a failure of another handler. That's a practical answer, but I don't and wouldn't accept a finding because a line maintenance engineer of the airline didn't give a clear to push signal, he just nodded his head. That would be totally unfair. I'm requiring then the ground staff member responsible for departure, who isn't me, to understand and follow the procedure.
Yes?
Yeah, today the standard says the provider shall ensure that. Is to say that we could understand that there is somehow a responsibility of the provider to ensure that line engineer or third party in charge of the cockpit communication follows the procedure.
And it's the point around language where when we sit as a group of SMEs for the operations and we say shall ensure, we know what shall ensure means. It's the person who should do it. But as you said, a good example of where language potentially needs to be considered in here as we go forward and further develop it in light of the actual auditor. Because you said, well, it says please ensure. So although it's not your person, you should ensure that that takes place. And that's my point about I can go and talk to the organisation to ensure it takes place. But what's clear is that procedure is the ground staff member responsible shall give the clear to push. We're not saying to an organisation that doesn't have the ground staff member that you've got to have a shall to make sure it happens. This is the operating procedure. It's the responsibility of the person to do the task that we're describing here.
Was there another question here or not? No? Okay.
Okay, back to signaling, I guess. I'd highlight row 298 because at the end of the pushback procedure, the tractor driver has to signal it with the brake signal. Again, that's a requirement. It's a shall. Okay. I don't think there's anything new here. The green text is where we've moved staff guided business, and it's existing edition 11 content.
Yeah, there are many changes here because of the responsibility part went into the procedure.
Yes.
So that's why there are a lot of green font. But the procedure itself didn't change.
And then there's pushback disconnection, which is now coming towards the end of the departure process. Again, point B, row 401 is not new content. That's been a process step forever. It's just putting it into the right place in the sequence. And again, if we've got it correct, all of the column D yeses should be describing the process of actual pushback tractor and tow bar disconnection. And then we'll come on and there's disconnection of a TBL and then pushback completion. Okay, and I think that finishes off the pushback section.
Yep, that covers it.
Certainly.
Of course. The microphone is coming.
I'm presuming here that your group has been meeting up with the flight ops group because this part is a complete overlap with flight operations. And if we read in the FCOMs and if you read the communications that have been guided by the manufacturer as well as the other safety groups all over the world, my humble request is that just to make sure that it's exactly the same what is in the flight ops group. Otherwise, there is going to be a confusion and these standards, because I know it's very well written, but I'm just concerned that there could be some polishing which may be required, because the pilots are reading directly from that book. And after hearing what the Director General was meaning, that standardization, then it should be exactly the same what the pilot is reading and what the ground handler is reading. Yeah. Even the call out, even the communication call should be identical.
Well,
just a recommendation. Yeah.
And JJ, and it is a very, very good point on this one in particular, and JJ may choose to give you some more of the background, but for instance, you mentioned the departure communication dialogue that's in a table, and I can recall...
Don't get me started. No,
I did say,
really, because when I say to you, it's still happening that from Asia to South America to Europe, we still see airlines deviate from a standard pushback communication. Why? It's 5 lines, and it could be the same, and still the flight operations group says, no, it's not good. What is not good? Well, brakes should be something else. Okay, then we changed it again, etc., and we cannot get to a conclusion. Now, we all know flight ops, also my organization, they have an opinion, they want to have a standard, they want to have a checklist. And for my airline, KLM is saying, okay, when there is a world standard, and many companies are with us, we are willing to change, but we're not changing the first part. Okay, fair enough. And even, we are married with Air France, we still have 2 separate pushback protocols. And it's dangerous. It's the last handshake you have, absolutely. And we cannot get it through together with flight ops.
But isn't this a wonderful opportunity to harmonize this?
But this is harmonized, for sure, absolutely. But on the pushback protocol, it's still on the table, and we need to work on that. And from the ground ops team, already for 5 years, and even I think also in Mac's time, there was already talks with them, and maybe something like that. So ground ops is willing, and on the flight side, there is still a problem, or we cannot solve it. So, but we're going to try again. So hopefully there will be a world standard in IGOM, and also in the OMs after that, and matching.
Okay, there's then a section on incidents and how the ground handling staff should deal with those. I don't think any of those points have been put in as auditable. There's then another what-if scenario section about when it's necessary to re-establish communication. And I don't think that was auditable, it's a what-if. And then you come on to 2 sections that we said they're auditable. I don't know how often you'll see them, aircraft power back or open ramp departure. Certainly we do have more open ramp departures than aircraft power backs, but that would be a not non-standard, because it's a standard process, but it's not obviously as normally seen as a pushback. And then we go into towing, I think.
Dieter, Dieter have a question.
Yeah, what was the reason to take power back out of the program?
Because the only airline that used PPU was Air France, but they no longer do so.
I do not know where you walk around, but I have it found in the last years in about 20 airports.
Well,
all over Europe and Asia and Africa.
Yeah. As I just finished off, that was the feedback that we got. And we had done extensive feedback to try and establish where PPU was used. But if that's incorrect and we've taken it out and there are still airlines or handlers that are using a PPU, then certainly that's good feedback and we need to put it back in.
But Dieter, are you talking about PPU or powerback?
Powerback.
Powerback. Okay, that's something. PPU is a main gear.
I know what PPU is. Don't worry.
No, but
the powerback was on the table here now.
Okay, so it's powerback.
Yeah. Powerback is still there.
Powerback is wide oftenly used. There are some airports where you can only use some of the parking positions with powerback only and no other opportunity.
And that's why it's in again, because it was out and now it's in again. Yeah. But we do not recommend it still. That was the whole thing.
Okay, we're not going to go through towing, are we, Gurdeep?
No, it's okay. We have 30 minutes.
It follows pretty much the same structure as the pushback, not surprisingly. The first phase of the towing maneuver is a pushback, and then we have additional content for the actual towing maneuver. Not surprisingly, responsibilities are similar, other than the fact that we have a section that includes the responsibilities of a brake operator, where the towing process uses a brake operator in the cockpit, and also a headset operator and a VHF operator. So we've tried to cover off the additional or different roles that would apply whilst doing a tow. Lady has a question.
Yes, perhaps I missed it, but what if there is no brake operator?
Well, that's, if you have a look at the section itself, it says where applicable. So it's one of those things where, as with the pushback, we describe the main roles, but if it's someone else doing the function, you would have that in their local procedure.
No, I mean when nobody is on the flight deck.
Yeah. Well, then I think you'll find that the process is written in a way that it covers it off to have the process described when there isn't a brake operator as well.
It's not mandatory. We are really struggling in Europe. Germany is only one of the only exceptions where they allow it. And believe me, we are also looking into it. But still, our regulator will not allow us to do it without a brake operator because of the beacon lights which have to be on. And you have in Germany, you are doing it differently. But that's why it's not a world standard yet. So it's a variation as we see it, the Germany part. But hopefully we can manage it. And but maybe we can say if applicable for the brake operator, because then it's okay for those stations who are having single man towing.
As you said, this section is a little bit, it may be 2 people, it may be 3, and we tried to cover as best we can all of the options, but we can't therefore describe exactly one process, A, B, C, D, if different people take it in different ways. So.
No, but then there's nobody on the flight deck. That's the thing. Yeah. There's another question, Steve.
Sorry, sir.
My question about the towing process. In case of any communication failure during the towing process, what will be the backup method? Is there any related item?
It would be hand signals, as it would be for the pushback.
Is there any? But I cannot see any related item for the towing process. It is available for pushback process, but for towing process, I never seen such a item.
Yeah, it is covered in, if you see on the screen 495, the incidents during towing.
Yeah.
And if you read in detail in the IGOM, it says that what exactly is the procedure the concerned person need to do that. So they will start using the hand signal. But see, we are not auditing the incident emergency situations. So that's why it's just not showing here. But in the documentation of the GSP, in the IGOM, when you see the content, it's there. That's there defined in 495 and before the towing completion as incident during towing. And if you go back to the pushback, there are chapter 469 incident during pushback.
Okay, but pushback and the towing is a different process.
Yeah, so this is different. 495 is a different procedure.
Can we go there? Can we see?
Not from this spreadsheet, I don't think we can we? Have you got the spreadsheet table in there?
Those are not the auditable activities.
Okay.
It is a good point. I'll check. I think, as Gurdeep says, it is in incidents during towing. We're not seeing that because it's a whole bunch of things, aircraft fire, GSE fire. I'll check it. It does need to be in there, but it is the same principle as in the pushback. It's revert to hand signals.
Okay, thank you.
And the last section in the manual was one added last year as a result of COVID, and that's long-term parking for aircraft. It's not auditable. The content has been taken straight out of the IATA guidance document, but put in sort of a more procedural way. And I think that brings us to the end of the Chapter 4 review. From my perspective, I'd like to say a big thank you. I've certainly learnt from a few points the need as we go forward to think about how this now would read to an auditor rather than just how this would now read to people on a ramp environment, let's say, if it's going to be used as a checklist. I think it's also been worthwhile to hear the feedback around the operational points. And as JJ said earlier, it will be great if you start looking at the checklists. If you see stuff that you think is wrong, please do send it in to us. We can but consider it in the working group, which, as I said, carries on.
So this is 495, if you see that, incident during towing. So there is a detailed table is mentioned, like what is the communication between the brake operator or the VHF operator with the tractor driver. So you have the IGOM, so you can go through that, but if you have any suggestions or anything, please send us a communication. We'll still again look into that. But the procedure is there. But when you're looking into documentation, this thing, then auditor need to check all those things. But implementation, this is not, emergency situations are not included on-site audits, right?
And VHF, not hand signature form.
Fine, with this, thank you very much. And thank you, JJ and Steve. And before we close the session, I just want to wrap up and say thank you to you. And it is very important going forward that all of you please go through the IGOM. And whenever you go on the ramp during the on-site or even the documentation still you will have the access of that. But it is very important that you understand what is the flow of the IGOM as compared to the ISEGO. When you see all the chapters, it's in the flow of the activities. That's a very plus point in the IGOM. So as an auditor, when we go there, you can remember that, yes, this section talks about that, this section talks about that. So it's very, very important and critical that all of you please read the IGOM and what I'll say, remember it. Right? That's very important.
I think there's a
Just on behalf of the ground operations team, many thanks for having made the effort to come here. We hope that the knowledge that you have gained, the trends that you have learned about how the industry is going, the challenges that the industry is going through with the skills staff shortage, standardization, and many other topics will help you when you are on site to understand better how difficult it is. And the reason why is so important for us to standardize. The ground operations team is fully aware that you are eager to know how the new model will work. But I just want to say that you have to remember that we haven't presented any of this to anyone, just to you. One of you was telling me, but why do you present it if it's not finished? Because we want your input. So when it comes to due time, we will also present you what it will be the new model. But rest assured that we are already working with the portal, with the BRD, with the integration of ISEGO into the e-store of IATA, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of engineering to be done because then you will need also to be trained. It's not that we do this session and then we consider that you are all done. No, we will have to plan for training and so on. So, and as I said yesterday, we want a more frequent and transparent communication with all of you because you are a very important part of the program. And we thank you for your contributions, for your patience, and we look forward to meeting you soon again. Thank you very much to everyone. Thank you.